As a human resources professional, Jared Turner had been in charge of furloughing and laying off colleagues as the coronavirus gripped businesses in New York. But by the end of March, Turner too had lost his job at startup exercise group 305 Fitness.
It's been a pretty hard hit, to be honest, but thankfully, I did get some severance from 305 that I've been able to live off of, and I do have some savings, but ultimately, if I'm unable to find a job by the end of July, we'll be moving back to Philadelphia with my parents.
The 26-year-old is just one of at least 33 million Americans who filed for unemployment since March the 21st. The benefits system has been struggling with the influx, and Turner is yet to receive any support.
Economists are optimistic that the US has passed the peak of monthly job losses. But while President Donald Trump pushes for the economy to reopen and for lockdown measures to be lifted, it is unlikely that the labour market will rebound anytime soon.
The shocks to the US economy are expected to continue well into 2020. Some estimates suggest second quarter GDP will contract at an annualised rate of as much as 40%. And the International Monetary Fund sees the US economy contracting 5.9% for the full year.
I think the unemployment rate could peak somewhere around 25 to 28% in that range. The only difference is that when you open up the economy, not all jobs will be there. In fact, I estimate that when you look at small businesses, you can probably expect or should expect that as much as 20% of those jobs simply won't come back.
There are hopes that new jobs will open up as the economy and consumption shift. For example, there are likely to be more opportunities in healthcare and other services such as couriers post-pandemic.
I think we're going to get back on our feet. The economy is going to start growing in the second half of the year. I actually believe that we're going to start to see positive growth in the fourth quarter.
In an encouraging sign there are still jobs out there, Turner has had several interviews and is staying positive.
By the end of August, things will start to pick up, and fingers crossed we get a vaccine, and hopefully that will speed timelines up.
But vaccine or not, there's no denying it will be a very different employment environment after one of the biggest blows to the US economy in a century. Katie Gregory, TRT World, New York.
For more, let's go to economist Megan Green in Boston. She's a senior fellow at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. Welcome to Money Talks, Megan. So we've got a record high unemployment rate of 14.7%. It's really hard to believe that it wasn't long ago, it was in February, that the unemployment rate was at a 50-year low of 3.5%. Was this purely about the coronavirus lockdowns that happened in March?
Yeah, I think this jobs report really was about the lockdowns, and the official unemployment rate was 14.7%. But the BLS, which collects the data, said that actually there was a misclassification of people who were saying that they were, temporarily out of work. And if you included them, actually the unemployment rate would be closer to 20%, which is in line with kind of what economists expect from the jobless claims data. So the reality is probably even worse. And what we found is that in addition to a huge spike in unemployment, you also saw a big jump in wage growth. And normally that would be a really positive thing. But this time around, it's actually a negative story. It means that all of the hourly service workers who have had persistently low wage growth through the last recovery, they've all been laid off. So they've dropped out of the numbers. And so that's why wage growth is so much higher. It's because those workers who were already the most vulnerable have now lost their jobs.
Now, as we heard in the story there are some analysts warning that the unemployment rate could go even higher after this. Is that your view as well?
Absolutely. This isn't a peak. It's just the beginning of the story. I think unemployment could go as high as 30%, which of course we've never seen before. And a lot of investors have been asking me, how long will it take for us to get all these jobs back? We've basically lost all the jobs we've created since 2011 in roughly a month and a half. And it's going to take years for these jobs to come back, if they even come back, because of course a lot of industries aren't going to reopen the same way. Airlines, retail, they won't be the same after this crisis that they were beforehand, and a lot of firms will shutter as well.
That's right. And when these industries do get back up and running and reopen, when might we see that reopening have an impact on these unemployment numbers?
So when the economy does reopen and we get some demand back, we should start to see it feed back through into the numbers. I think most people are really focused on the policy side, on when we actually reopen. But it's the confidence piece that is just as important as whether we're allowed to go out. If you told me I could go out and get on a plane tomorrow and go on holiday, there's no way I'd do it. And it turns out in the U.S., at least, 71% of Americans say, according to a recent poll, they won't go to a restaurant or a bar tomorrow if allowed. 80% won't go to a large event. So I think even if we're allowed to go out, demand's not just going to snap back. We're not just going to return to normal until we have some confidence that we've contained the virus. And we won't fully have that until we have a vaccine or a cure. Maybe it will build slowly in the interim.
Now, as we know, the US Congress has so far approved more than $2 trillion worth of stimulus measures, and a large part of that is going to subsidising people who have lost their incomes throughout this crisis. Is there anything more that the government needs to be doing in order to perhaps stem this rising unemployment?
Yeah, so the government is mainly focused on relying on unemployment insurance to support people who have been laid off. And that is a good plan for the U.S. economy. So we've beefed up unemployment insurance. But actually maintaining a connection between workers and their employers during a temporary drop in demand like this would be helpful too. And Europe usually takes that approach. So they engage in work sharing programs. It turns out 27 states in the US actually have work sharing programs. It's just most businesses don't know they exist. So the government could fund work sharing programs, do more to incentivize states that don't have them to create them. That could help workers. And also, I think that the funding that the government has provided through these payment protection plans, the PPPs, they're just insufficient. It's not enough money. So providing more money to provide grants to companies that keep people on payrolls, that could help too.
Now, this data has been closely watched in conjunction with the weekly US jobless claims. Now, we've seen 5 consecutive weeks of declines in those figures. Is that a promising sign for the US jobs market?
It's better than having increasing jobless claims every week, but I don't think that means that the worst is over. I think we're going to continue to see large numbers of jobless claims. I mean, the most recent one was in the 3 millions. That's huge by historical standards. So yes, it's less than the previous week, but it's still pretty big. And so I think we can expect these bad numbers to continue to come through for weeks to come, especially while most of the country is still technically locked down. And as I said before, while people don't really have confidence that we've contained the virus, even if they're allowed out, we're not going back to normal anytime soon.
Okay, Megan Green in New York, thank you so much for your analysis. Really appreciate it.